welcome, Zeke.
Okay, thank you very much. So, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Or can I stand up? I stand up. Okay. First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I think it's a great opportunity for me to meet you and to actually share with you what we've done. And I know that I had a meeting in this institute, I think about 4 or 5 years ago. I'm terrible with memorizing things. So, but that was the beginning of when we started the program of looking at the impact of cancer on employment. Once now we've got a bit more evidence under our sleeve. And I think what I'm going to do, as it is in the title, I'm going to concentrate, to focus a bit more on the employer side of the business here. Yeah? Okay, as I said before, I came here a few years ago, and I know that you've done a lot of work in the area of health and work, or work and health, whatever you want to look at it, which way. But as Ron said before, not necessarily with a great focus on cancer, and I thought I would like to share with you what we've done, and maybe something will come up for the future to do something in collaboration. So, just want to, that's just a little bit of show off, that's what we're coming for. It doesn't look always like that, it is in the dark, so nobody is gloomy and raining and wet, so just a little bit of show off, what can I do? Right, just want to set the scene, because, you know, I'm sure that you know, but if you're talking to people, lay people, and talk about cancer survivorship or living with cancer, many people say, what's talking about? People with cancer actually have a death sentence, they're going to die very shortly. So what are these issues about employment, finance, rehabilitation? So just to, obviously, if anybody has any kind of more information about that, I do apologize, but just to give you some kind of information that cancer has become a different situation now. And it's become one, although it's still the one, cancer is still the leading of morbidity and mortality, but more and more people actually manage to live with the disease, either cured or living with the disease for longer periods of time, and rehabilitation, issues around rehabilitation becoming quite important and quite relevant, and it has become very recently. I know that in North America it started before us in Europe, but in the UK, I think the issues came about from working with our patients in about 2008. And the first statistic that we got from the Cancer Research UK, at the end of 2008, approximately 2 million people living in the UK with a diagnosis of cancer, and that means cured and even not cured, some kind of bad, relatively good prognosis. Yeah? Some other things, at the end of 2008, anyway, it's about nearly 200 men and more women by the age of 45 to 64 that actually got diagnosis of cancer. Yeah? And talk about this working age. Yeah? And as we know, along with all these financial implications, participation in the work is recognized as very important for many, many people with cancer. And we've done a lot of work in that, and people told us that getting back to work was one of the milestones to actually getting back to normal. Yeah? And just to let you know, a recent review of the literature, which was done in 2011, reports about 64% of people with cancer managed to get back to work, and that was a review of many, many studies in various countries, and the range is between 24 to 94. However, getting back to work is not the end of the story here. It is quite important to see what happened to them for 3, 4, 5 years along the line. And I think I'm going to say something about it a bit later. Okay, again, based on the literature, what are the factors actually related to return to work? Obviously, age is a very important factor. And there was a large Danish cohort which actually suggests that people aged 50 to 60 at the time of diagnosis may have a greater chance to be unemployed. Another Spanish study that actually found that being over 44 years of age was significantly associated with longer sick leave. And I'm sure that you know from different conditions that the length of the sick leave, or do you call it sick leave here, or sickness absence, is very positively associated with, or negatively associated with the chances to go back to work. Yeah? As long as longer, it's difficult to get back to work. Yeah? cancer sites have been found to be associated with the return to work, and the worst one is liver, lung, brain, and the central nervous system, pancreatic, head and neck, and gynecological cancers. Probably those are the cancers which have not a very good prognosis, and probably not, again, when you look at the statistics, people who have been diagnosed with this kind of cancers have not as good chance to go back to work. As I said before, length of sickness absence, there is quite a few studies reporting that. Obviously, the local welfare policies, you can't really compare between Europe and the United States, for example. It's different motivation to go back to work. As far as in America, it's very much financial motivation to go back to work, while in Europe, the financial necessity is not as strong as in America. I think Canada is different as well. And work environment and manual work, and I'm going to get to that because that's the focus of my presentation today, and perceived employers' accommodation, how employers or managers, or you call it supervisors here, actually perceive the role in doing this accommodation that needed to actually help people to go back to work. And another thing which was found in those literature, advice from both employer and health professionals in the right time and the good advice actually contribute to a better and more successful return to work for people with cancer. Again, if you have any burning questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand and ask me in the middle. Right. Again, just to convince you that cancer is an area that needs to be actually looked at as far as employment is concerned. In a meta-analysis which was done a few years ago by my colleague in Amsterdam, they found that people with cancer have 1.5 more chances to be unemployed. And that was a big analysis that was done, quite a few studies in the area. And I think we're talking about, when you look at the literature, we have different countries, different welfare policies, and the findings have different nature. And it is very, very difficult to actually come to some conclusions about that. So I think there is a need to do some more work in that. And obviously, we're not quite sure, is it to do with the consequences of cancer or something else here? So I think that's something which I would like to focus a bit more in my further presentation here. Right, so what I want to do today, with your permission, is to report very quickly about 2 studies we've done. But the most important thing for me is the third one, is to have some of your views about what's going on, how we can actually help supervisors to do what they have to do better. Yeah. So the first one, I'm going to report to you a survey, a national survey we've done with patients, which just recently finished, and it hasn't been published. We are waiting to hear from the journal. And the aim of that was to identify and describe the impact of cancer diagnosis on survivors, work activities, and the perceptions of the supervised reaction to the diagnosis of cancer. It was a quantitative cross-sectional survey approach. Actually, participants were purposely selected by the cancer registry. You have cancer registry here as well, yeah? Yeah? Okay. And we actually selected registry in the hope they should have a nice black minority people, but that wasn't the outcome. Obviously, the inclusion criteria was age 21 to 60. We actually selected the 5 cancers that have a better prognosis, better survival rates, which are breast, prostate, colorectal, bladder, and Hodgkin disease. We talked the bladder and Hodgkin disease; those are a bit more rare cancer, whilst the breast, prostate, and colorectal are a bit more common cancers. And the other criteria was that those patients should be diagnosed about 2 or 3 years before we actually approached them. The analysis was very, very straightforward. It was a linear regression and binary. I don't know, I'm not a statistician, so I'm just reading what's written here. And we've done a kind of a regression analysis to see if there is anything associated with the demographic or whatever. Okay. Right, results. Unfortunately, we had a very disappointing result. We aiming to have much more than what we got. But again, talking about excuses now, we actually went out with that in a very, very difficult period of time. I don't know, probably you're aware that the global economic situation is bad, but in Europe it's even worse than that. And the UK or England on its own was very badly affected. Hopefully, the optimistic people said that they can see the light in the end of the tunnel, but I'm not sure about that. So we had very, yeah.
When were you trying to recruit?
That was in 2010. Yeah. And we done also all sorts of techniques to enhance the recruitment. And I don't know, again, if you have this rule here. In the UK, we are not allowed to approach patients without the clinician permission. Yeah? Even the cancer registry is not allowed to do that. So we have to do that via the GP. Mm-hmm. And the GPs had a very tough period of time. They didn't collaborate. They lost a lot of patients because they didn't want to participate, and we couldn't actually get hold of them. And again, although we offered them some money for doing that, it didn't help. So we end up with 382 people, which is, at the moment, is the largest sample in the UK in that area. But it is very, very low response rate here, which that's what we got. So again, we have nearly 400 people. The mean age was 50 years of age, obviously more female than male. Very dominant white, British, married with some education. So it was mainly middle class. That's a common thing in many surveys that people are doing. Those are the people actually collaborating with you. It's very difficult to get to the hard people, which are lower social class and people with less education. Work situation. Before, 87% of them reported that they were in paid work. That was compared with 6, so there was about 20% reduced in the employment status. There was significant rises in percentages of unemployed from 1% before to 4% after. From retirement from 4% before to 17% before, long-term sick leave, and 25 stopped working after being treated for the cancer. So quite a lot of people actually changed their working situation because of to do with the cancer. Nearly half, 44%, worked the same number of hours before diagnosis compared with the time of the survey. And 66 actually changed the working time. So people decided to do some changes in their life, even if they carry on working. Okay? Right. This is the most important thing for the presentation today. We asked patients what they think, what they thought about their own, we call it line managers, we call it supervisors or employers. So the majority reported positive attitudes, positive reactions from the employers. Most of them, I gave them some statements to actually assess the agreement of that. Most of them said, 73% said that the employers or the managers didn't ask them to set an exact date for return to work, so they were quite flexible with that. More than half did not believe that the employee, more than half of the employees think that the employers didn't believe the cancer people are less capable to perform than without cancer. 7% think that the employers didn't think it was impossible to manage an employee with cancer. That's what we asked them what their line manager, their supervisor think about them. Yeah? And 3/4 actually think that their line managers were perceived to be very supportive during the whole process, very happy for the employees to continue work before starting the treatment. Most of them, 73% said that they made reasonable adjustment to the employees' normal duties and stayed in touch with them throughout the whole of this journey with the treatment. So it's quite a pinky picture here. So how we can explain the reducing the numbers before, but that again to do maybe with the way we actually pose the questions there. Yeah. Any questions before I'm going further?
Was that the experience with the supervisor was from the patient's perspective?
Yes. Yeah. And now I'm moving to another study we've done that was done in 2010. We actually surveyed quite a lot of supervisors, and we could get you, we are saying line managers, supervisors in England to actually explore their attitudes, their knowledge, and what they think about people with cancer. It was an online questionnaire that was, we targeted quite a few managers. And the main aim of this was to address the following questions. Can factor underlying supervisor attitudes be empirically identified? And we managed to do that. And are there any meaningful differences among the identified factors despite the demographic variables? Am I too quick for you, or is it okay? Yeah? Right. We developed a questionnaire, an online questionnaire based on a review of the literature, which had all sorts of information from qualitative and quantitative work. And I think we actually piloted that with a small group of managers before we put it on the web. And obviously the questionnaires include items covering the following themes. What to think about their own emotional burden of dealing with somebody who actually come back after having cancer. How they feel about striking the balance between the individual's and organizational needs. Attitudes towards employing people with cancer, general attitudes, what they think about people that have cancer. What they think about support they are getting from senior management and mainly HR departments, and what they think about their own skills to cope with these eventualities. Yeah? So we managed to develop a questionnaire which was 14 items that was circulated, as I said before, online to supervisors working in the public sector, private and small to medium enterprises. Respondents were asked to rate the attitude items or using a 5-point Likert type agreement, and from strongly disagree 1 to strongly agree, which is 5.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Were you targeting people who had been exposed to a worker with cancer, or were you able to, okay.
Normally,
that would be hard to figure out.
We actually had some collaboration with senior occupational health physician in one big region in the country, and he actually helped us to enhance use his network, and we actually approached managers in this way.
Okay.
Not necessarily that have even experience with employing somebody with cancer. Okay, again, as I said before, I'm not a statistician, so for anybody who would like to know how we analyze that, that's only to pronounce these words here. So we actually, the main aim was to see if there are any main themes, what the manager is saying to us, and that was the way to actually analyze that. And then the effect of the demographic characteristics and organizational variables on the supervisors was examined by multivariate analysis of variance. Right, what we found. 370 supervisors completed the questionnaire. More men, it's more than 50-50 men and women, which is good. The majority, 60%, had worked for the same organization for more than 10 years. So we're talking about people that had quite good experience in their workplace. A quarter of them had managerial responsibility in the past and the present for employee with cancer. Only a quarter had direct experience employing somebody with cancer. Yeah? And just for you, some characteristics. So that's the age distribution and the organization size. Again, it was mainly bigger, large organization because that's easier to target. But we have few smaller as well. And obviously, the managers are middle age, as we say. Again, looking at the sector of the employers, so I think we have not too bad distribution between private and public. We have few voluntary. We approach few managers, a few head teachers, and we put them separately because we thought it's a different kind of employers. So we have to treat them in a different way. And we asked them, sorry about this table, we asked them how many employees they are supervising, and it was not a lot, but it's a fair distribution, I would have thought. Yeah? Any questions? Okay. Right, what we found out. First of all, we found five themes or factors that actually came up from what the way actually they answered the questionnaire. The first one was fearful attitudes towards cancer survivors. And what I mean, I give you just, for example, a few items on the questionnaire that actually have to assess the agreement with that. The first one, it is impossible to manage someone with terminal cancer. Most of them, all of these group of statements were negative, yeah? Then the second one, individuals return to work after cancer are not as able to perform their duties. And the third one, just for an example, individuals will be less committed to work after cancer. And as you can see, they didn't agree with that. They had quite a low score, which is 1.88, with strongly based 5, just to remind you. Yeah? So overall attitudes quite positive. Yeah. Now coming to the second factor, supportive attitudes, and that's actually composed of 4 items. We're dealing with a positive attitude towards the return to work process of employees with cancer. And just to give an example for the items, individuals should be legally entitled to adjustment to working duties. Individuals should have a phased return to work on full pay. And we have here quite a good agreement with that, because those are 2 quite positive items, and we have nearly 4 actually agree with that. Now, coming to supervisor's burden, yeah? And just to give a flavor, supervisors should not have too much responsibility in managing attendance, yeah? Senior managers don't recognize, senior managers in England, probably the same terminology here is the HR department, don't recognize the difficulties supervisors face. And we can see it's not a very good agreement, but it's quite an agreement here. We have 3.33, which I think we've done before that in the pilot. We have some interviews with managers. That's a big cry for supervisors. They feel that they're in the front line there with no support whatsoever, and they need to actually juggle with all of the contradicting demands for delivering what they have to produce and delivering the accommodation for people after cancer. The fourth one was maintaining normality, and again, that's something to do with maintaining a sense of normality for employee with cancer. To give you a flavor of what the items were, excuse me, return to work during treatment helps normality and should be encouraged. Fine to continue working before treatment starts. So we have quite a good agreement to that, 4.44. Then we had a very odd few questions here about what manager thinks about financial aid for people with cancer. And to give you an example, individuals with terminal cancer should not have to work for financial benefits. Individuals would be better at home than in work for financial benefits. And we got here less than 3, which is quite a moderate agreement with that. Not strongly agreement, but not disagreement, which I think that's to do with the nature, because the first question is very much different than the second one. So that actually causes differences here. So overall, what we can see here, that's generally, when we ask them about the overall attitudes towards people with cancer, they actually provide us with very positive attitudes. But when we ask them about their own, and I think those actually caused the more agreement with the burden was those who actually had direct experience with people, with employees somebody with cancer. And again, from the qualitative work we've done before the question here, we gathered a lot of complaints about the fact that HR are having very nice policies on the shelves, but they don't understand what the policies are about, and nobody actually comes to help them to actually implement what the policies in practical way. And there was a big cry, we need some help here. The other thing we've done is just to look if there are any demographic variables actually associated with that. So overall, we didn't find any significant effects we found with age, time as managers, and experience in managing employees with cancer. However, a few things which I, at the moment, don't know how to actually interpret that or how to explain that. Female managers reported less fearful attitudes than men. I don't know. I don't want to be sexist here, but again, there is something behind that. Women also held more favorable attitudes towards maintaining normality for employees. Females were less concerned about additional workload burden as a result of managing employees with cancer than men. And then the last group of school managers, they scored significantly higher on the financial benefit factors than managing the voluntary and public sector. I thought to report that, but I don't really know how to explain, unless you've got some ideas to help me how to explain those. Anyone? Yeah?
I was listening to a gentleman who was a physician surgeon for prostate cancer for men. And one line still sticks out in my mind, and he said, breast cancer research is further ahead because the willingness of women to sacrifice their lives to go into research for other women for the future. He said, men don't do that. And he was a man, and he said, the prostate research therefore lags behind the breast cancer research.
Yeah, I agree with that. But we're talking about here about management.
Well, it's
not
another, women,
Beneficence of the women.
what he was saying, we're digging in
Yeah.
to the problem, and we're addressing it head on, whereas men just wanted to cure for themselves now.
Maybe yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense. Anybody else
I
like
don't know if it
to
relates, but.
contribute anything here?
Well, I think that makes sense with 1 and 2 and 3 about putting other people's needs before your own.
Right. Yes, what was it coming?
And maybe the female managers in your sample are better managers.
Some people say that they always make better managers. Yes.
I think there is some industrial organizational research that does say that women will focus on both the relationship aspects of management as well as productivity, whereas males traditionally will focus more on the productivity side, and the relationship, if it works out, that's great. But I guess one of the questions, I don't know if you can analyze it, is whether or not the women and the male supervisors were in very different types of industries.
Yeah. We can't go back to the data. I don't have the answer now.
Right.
But I think that really makes sense what you're saying. Do you have evidence for that?
Well, I
From
know.
different conditions, yeah?
I know
From different
there is research on relationship or on supervisory styles that's out there.
Right.
That you could, that might be what's going on with the gender. It's a style of supervisory responsibilities. And then you can look and see whether or not you've got more women in the public sector, for example, versus private, where you might expect productivity to be more important in the private.
Yeah, yes, you might be very right. Yeah. You want to say something?
So another thing, probably also depends how people frame it. So if their experience, like with female managers, if their experience with cancer is breast cancer, where the outcomes are quite positive in the last few decades, and when the men actually frame it differently when they think about other types of cancer, maybe that's not.
Yeah.
Maybe if they think about prostate cancer, they think about older workers, about other issues that might actually play a role.
Yeah, but again, statistically, I think the prognosis for men with prostate is not very much more worse than for women with breast. The only difference is the prevalence of breast cancer is actually happening in a younger age than prostate. So, all sorts of explanations might be here. But I think what you said here might be something to take forward and see where these ladies were, or if there's any difference in the nature of the organization to work. There might be something, because I said to you quite a few schools were involved there, and as far as, again, I can't make being 100% sure, but many schools are managed by females rather than males. So that might be something, but again, it's something which might look at it further.
Maybe I'll just ask, we have on the line our colleague Vicki Christman, who's been doing some work on the role of supervisors in the return to work process. So Vicki, if you want to jump in at any point, feel free to speak up, or we can also come back to you later.
Okay, thanks, Ron. I actually find your results very interesting, Ziv, because actually we'll be able to answer a lot of the same questions and compare what you've done looking at response to low back pain.
Yeah.
So we haven't actually finished the analysis yet. We're still collecting some data, but we will be able to look at the gender difference and looking at sectors, as Monique suggested, and the supervisory style. We collected data on leadership style as well, so it would be very interesting to see if those actually are the reasons for the differences and not necessarily just the gender.
Okay.
And I think it would be really interesting, Vicki and Ziv, to look at those results and see, are people more favorable towards those who have had cancer versus a work injury, or vice versa? What's the difference there in how people think?
Again, there's no,
Yeah, I completely agree, Sarah.
Yeah.
and again, there's something behind that, because the big C is still for the lay people, still making quite a significant effect when you think about cancer as something which you have a but it's different, yeah. So yeah, that might be interesting to follow up. Right. So just to summarize it, frontline managers or supervisors, sorry about that, have both positive and negative attitudes about employing people with cancer. The positive are the importance of cancer survivors being provided with support and the effort to return to work and the role of the workplace in the return to normality. The negative ones, cancer survivors' ability to engage. I have some doubts about the ability to engage in work and found it difficult to actually juggle with the different demands. And supervisors reported the need for more advice and guidance to enable them to put the organization policy regarding managing employees with disabilities into practice. And that's not only cancer, I think we can look at that in a broader sense of long-term condition as well. I don't know again what's the situation in this country, but again, as I mentioned to you a few times during my presentation, those line managers, supervisors feel that are in front line, they need to actually deal with that. Nobody can tell them what to do. In most of what we've done in all of these organizations, we checked they had policies about how to help people with long-term conditions to go back to work. Some of them had very, very advanced, very nice policies, but when you approach the supervisors, they, first of all, quite a lot of them weren't well aware of the policies at all. They didn't know that they existed, or if they were aware, they found it very difficult to actually translate it into practice. Right. And again, as I said before, and that's to address what Vicky said, I think there is more research needed to identify the nature of the advice and guidance required by supervisors. And I think if that was my, as I said at the beginning, that was the main reason for presenting this to you. Maybe you got some ideas, maybe you should make some kind of comparison with different conditions. So now we're moving to the third part of that. That's the reference for everybody who would like to look at that, and I think the presentation is going to be...
Yes, we'll post the slides.
Okay, so for me that's the most important part of this meeting with you, is to have some kind of, from your ideas, from working in different conditions or from working in different areas, how and what is needed to support supervisors in facilitating the return to work of people with conditions, and what we need to do, how we're going to do that, who needs to do that, and how we're going to do that in the future. So please feel free to actually throw to the air your ideas from your experience, from whatever you want to say, your common sense. Okay? Anybody
Who
would
wants
like
to
shoot?
jump in? Ivan?
My question to you is, so what do you consider to be a good return to work outcome? Because what if you're 58 years old and you've been working since you were 18 and you save some money and get cancer, you survive cancer, and then you decide that it's actually time to call quits and retire. In that case, the worker doesn't return to work, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad outcome.
Yeah.
So how do you, what do you consider to be a good or
Yeah, it's a good question, although it's not addressing that one, but I'm quite happy to address that. In my view, a good outcome here is to let the employee that has been diagnosed with cancer will decide the right decision for himself or herself, yeah? And just to push them back to work, and then, because quite a lot of people actually were pushed back to work because they wanted to go back to work, and then they came back to work without any preparation, and then they got hit by the pressure that are not ready, because, again, I'm sure that you are familiar with the literature about new identity which actually happens after traumatic event. There was quite a lot of literature about people after the Holocaust, and I think it's not the same, but it's another kind of traumatic event. So after having been diagnosed with cancer, sometimes at the beginning they want to get back to normal, but after a while they found themselves that have a new identity now, so maybe work is not that important. But we need to help them to go through that and not to actually throw them to get hit by the wall and then say, oh, I need to change what I want to say. And part of that should be line managers and supervisors as well, because they actually dealing with the employees at the workplace. Yeah? Obviously, I don't think there will be a good answer for you to say that everybody should go back to work and work. Some people it will be better for them to consider retirement or changing career or whatever. But again, it should be in discussion with the actual employee, and we should help them to go through all of this process and not to throw them back to the fire and then say, oh, it's too hot, I'm leaving that in kind of emergency. Yes.
I think a lot of health researchers have a limited understanding of workplaces and how they work, and have a binary model in their minds of being a worker or a manager. And if you're a manager, you have a lot of control over things.
Yes.
And as your research shows, and you know, I've seen in my own research too, these supervisors, managers are sort of caught in the middle, actually, trying to keep people happy who they supervise and to meet other demands. And so what I've seen in some workplaces is when they're really serious about return to work is they build in extra time into managers' roles. But there tend to be one manager within a division who runs around and deals with it. So it's not built into the role of every manager. So it's a tricky situation.
It is. But how can we help them to deal with that? You know, there are all sorts of tricky situations in our life, and there's not for everything, but we have some support. But yeah.
This is not my area of expertise at all, but just thinking practically, they would have to have some kind of flexibility and resources available to, I mean, I would imagine an accommodation means the person isn't doing exactly the same job as they did before, but if the tasks have to get done, they have to have some kind of flexibility to replace that in some way, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
Did you have?
No, go ahead. Go ahead, sorry.
Did coworkers come up at all? We've done some research where that was a big issue, that the supervisors and the employee were negotiating and willing to negotiate. Coworker support seemed to make or break it.
Yeah.
If the coworkers were also on board, then it all worked very smoothly. If the coworkers weren't, supervisors, or the employee's perception is supervisors were forced to choose between them or their 15 coworkers, and the sheer numbers meant that the supervisors often fell with the coworkers. So I don't know if that's something. So when you say it didn't come up, you looked and it didn't come up, or it's not something that you have a lot of
we
information
haven't thought
on?
about when we planned the questionnaire, and in the discussion of that, we actually raised this issue. That should be, I think I can't agree more on what you're saying. We need to look at the co-workers as well. So when you look at the context of the workplace, it's the managers and the co-workers that are very important. But this piece of work didn't deal with that at all. And I don't know, we don't have the money to do anything at the moment, but to complete this picture, we have to actually do that and look at the co-workers as well. Again, although I know that there is quite a lot of evidence in different conditions, but again, as Ron said at the beginning, or who said that, cancer is a bit different, yeah, because line managers and supervisors are not health professionals, so they are not aware of that cancer has become a kind of another part of the long-term condition. So cancer for them is something which have to more sympathize with them, and then so it actually justifies some more research to look at co-workers as well. Maybe that might complete the picture. However, that actually will take us to to the literature about management literature, how the managerial process goes between HR to line managers in different places. What, again, from the prior things we've done with the qualitative piece of work, what we said was that HR throw them all sorts of demands without discussing that with them, without giving them some options how to deal with that. On the other hand, they need to actually deliver what they're actually being paid for, and they found it extremely difficult. One idea, just to let you know, that we are actually in the very initial stages of developing now, is we're trying to develop a kind of intervention for line managers, or supervisors, to first of all enhance the knowledge about long-term conditions, not we are broadening that now, not just cancer, and to give them some more skills how to negotiate with senior management in this area of how to help them to come back to their senior and say, okay, that was in the policy, now help me to do how I want to do that, because I need to actually produce that amount of product I need to do. You need me to actually bring back this employee back for part-time job. Let me know how I can do that. At the moment, they found it possible to go back and say I'm incapable to do that because that might be ruin the reputation as managers. Yeah? So we are planning to do something which, with the help of another company that's dealing with self-management with patients, but they're going to adjust this approach to deal with self-management of line managers, of supervisors. But that's one thing, it's a big area here. I'm just wondering, because you've done a lot of work in different areas, what else you think might be relevant to help line managers?
Oh, Sarah had an observation.
Yeah, I think these are interesting questions to address now in light of the demand for more understanding of how to deal with mental health issues at the workplace. And we're about to release a new standard, the Canadian Standards Association on mental health, integration of mental health programs into the workplace. And so if we could build more understanding and know-how, kind of like what you're getting at in your skill building workshop, then maybe we'll have the capacity to deal with all sorts of issues at work.
Sarah, is there any, can I interrupt? Or?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
you're
Vicky.
on, Vicky.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to comment, because about the difference between when you said that what are the main factors and that things could be different. I actually think a lot would probably be very similar. Just thinking back to Bill Shaw's work with his workplace intervention, where he did a supervisor training program.
Yes.
They actually did it, so it was all about musculoskeletal pain, and they actually, part of the intervention was to have a little training session on helping the supervisors to understand what musculoskeletal pain is and that people can actually still work with that problem. And they actually found that might not have been the major component that actually influenced their biggest findings. It was more likely that they did a big section on just how to help supervisors to learn to communicate with workers and with others, and to help teach them different problem-solving mechanisms. And they felt that those were the issues that, or the components of the training program that actually had the biggest impact. So I'm not sure that it would be a lot different between cancer survivors and those with, for example, low back pain, a training program. But it'd be very interesting to see. I think that's a key research question that I think we need to answer.
Yep, I agree. And I think that was one part of our discussion before, wasn't it?
Other observations? Questions? No?
What kind of accommodations generally work for people with cancer? What kinds of things are being done to assist them?
Mainly reducing of working hours.
Working hours.
Some depends on their occupation. Some people need different. For example, for women with breast cancer, they might have some problem with their hands, so they need some technical things to actually adjust the workplace to help them to do that. And another thing which is very, very common among people who are actually living with the outcome of the treatment is the fatigue. And that actually relates to reducing the working hours. They are talking about a great phenomenon that if you've never experienced that, you cannot understand that. Yeah? It's not just tiredness, it's extreme tiredness that actually disables them to do anything. And there is some breaks, there is all sorts of accommodation for that. It's really very much a personal thing, so it's tailor-made for each one to deal with. But again, it poses a lot of, it poses quite a burden on the line manager. Yes?
I'm just thinking about, in the Netherlands, I'm from the Netherlands originally, and we did the replication of the Sherbrooke trial that was originally from.
What's your name, sir?
The Sherbrooke trial.
No, what's your name?
My name is Ivan Steenstra.
Okay.
I work with Angela. I also work with Angela, who did the systematic review on.
Okay. I've heard your name before, so.
Yeah. Some people still don't know that I'm in Canada. So I'm thinking about, because in our intervention, so it's not a typical supervisor intervention, but in the end it's an intervention where the direct supervisor, the injured worker with low back pain, and somebody from the occupational health service sit down, and first step they do is make an inventory of, so what's the issue? So in that sense, I'm not sure. So what's needed to support supervisors? I'm not sure how you can actually support supervisors without, what you said is 25% of the supervisors once encountered a case where one of their employees actually had cancer and tried to get back to work.
Mm-hmm.
So every case is different and special. So maybe it's just more of a process that you can teach them, where they just have to take some time. And in the Sherwood trial in the Netherlands, it was just one morning session where they sat down, made an inventory of what the issues were, how they could resolve the issues, and how they would implement the solutions that they came up with. So asking the question how to support supervisors, I immediately think about but it's a process where the supervisor is involved, the worker is involved, and there's a whole setting. It all takes place in a particular setting. So it's not just giving tools to the supervisor or knowledge or changing his beliefs. Maybe it's about getting them to realize that every case is special, and they have to get the individual worker with his specific problems around the table and just sit down and discuss and make it. So bring it to the table, and instead of thinking that they are responsible all by themselves to solve the issues that might arise in the future.
Yeah, just to justify what I mentioned before about this intervention we are planning. Again, based on what we heard from the line manager, from the supervisors, is that okay, we've got a problem, we've got a demand from the senior managers, we cannot do that. Because it is impossible to do that, but we feel that we are not able to go back and say, listen, what you ask us to do, it is impossible, because that might ruin my capability as a manager. If we're going to go back and say, I cannot do that, or show me how to do that. So to target this problem, we thought maybe we should actually enhance the way to negotiate better. And if they feel that they've got unrealistic demands, they should feel confident enough to go back and say, okay, what you ask me to do, it is impossible to do, but let's discuss that. Yeah? The moment the thing is that say, okay, I'll do that, and then they cannot do that. So you see what I mean? And again, I totally agree with what you're saying, that there might be some other issues. It's a big area when you look at it, not just one. It is just one intervention we were thinking about. You want to say something? Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry.
I think it's bigger than that. You can avoid the supervisor negotiation with their senior management if society on a whole accepts and understands that people with limitations, whether it be from Huntington's, Parkinson's disease, cancer, musculoskeletal disorders, or amputations, is that people can return to work if everyone works together to understand what the limitations are and accept the accommodations, and you don't have to do that. I mean, one of the best things that Michael J. Fox did was go back to work.
Yeah.
Show that, you can return to your profession with certain parameters. And that's the main thing. The results and the supervisor attitude here, I'm a long-term WSIE person. I worked for 25 years, and every day I was in a different work site talking to supervisors about the return to work for their injured workers. The main barrier there, the musculoskeletal, was the supervisor didn't believe it because they couldn't see it. But when they had an amputee, they could see it. When there's cancer, man, it hits you in the gut because you don't want to get the cancer. So your empathy increases. So if you can extend that kind of empathy and understanding towards everyone, that would give people with disabled lives the opportunity to earn money like everyone else.
Yeah. Yes.
Hi. I just found here, because I heard this a couple of months ago, there is a partnership against cancer in Canada. I think they're a branch of the Canadian Cancer Society. And in July, they held a symposium where they were discussing return to work for survivors with cancer. And I remember that I saw somewhere in the news, or I got an email, but they have here some common themes identified. So they did this symposium and they recruited healthcare providers patients, caregivers, and employers. So they brought caregivers to the scene. And basically what they recommend is common themes is, let me see if I can read this with this small font here, is more robust accommodation strategies, better communication among all stakeholders, better education, especially about the side effect management, additional tools and resources to support best practices, improved financial support, and more research. So it's a website you can.
So I like the last one, more research.
Okay.
Partnership against cancer.
Like the Canadian organization, yeah?
It's a Canadian organization. Canadian Partnership Against.
Okay. There's one more.
No, I just wanted to echo that I think this idea about it maybe being a set of skills that are around every return to work situation might be really salient, really good, because then we build that up and research that, whether we can't do it Parkinson's or arthritis or working with individuals. And
So
just add to the return to work, they're also offering, Cancer Society offers return to work courses for people, like a self-management course around negotiating your way back to work.
Yeah, that's another line which has been done. You want to say that last thing?
Think about the long-term conditions in an aging society. Every manager probably needs those skills because people getting older and they will probably get some kind of long-term condition.
You've touched
But there's no
very
way around
Never.
dealing with.
Yeah. Okay, so just before finishing, another little bit of show off. Thank you very much for your listening. And if anybody would like to discuss that further with me, I think I'm around here today, and you have my email address. So anybody would like to share me on discussing with me over the email. And as I said before, I'm coming to this beautiful city quite frequently, so if anything will come up, we can meet again in the future. So many, many thanks for your listening and for your advice. Thank you very much.
Steve. Thank you.